recess, back to the regular council meeting. We are on item 13B, which is the authorization of staff to use the preliminary budget 1920 in the accounting system effective July 1, 2019. We have received a report from the interim city manager, and we are now going to receive the report from the finance committee. Councilmember Brian, go for it.
All right, I did turn the mics on if you want to.
Cool.
All right, we do have a great many suggestions. We've been working very diligently the last 2 months on this. And we feel, I think as a whole, the committee feels very thankful for working with staff. And that was a little bit hard at first to understand what we were doing there. We developed a really good sense of dialogue where I think most of our recommendations were adopted in the budget the staff has prepared. But there are some recommendations where we disagreed, and there are quite a few actually, where it's just we have a larger scope because we're doing oversight. They're just doing more immediate projections. So even though this is built from general fund all the way down to enterprises, in the interest of time, I think we should start with the enterprises. Peter, would you like to start with water?
Well,
You should read the recommendation.
are we on the front side of the page?
Yeah.
Recommend adopt staff recommended preliminary budget. You want me to speak to that?
Or we can go to the other page. Finance Committee recommends City Council adopt staff budget as prepared. We have a great deal of faith in the 5-year plan that was adopted 2 years ago. Things seem to be in good order in the water enterprise. It's sustaining itself, it's maintaining reserves. There's one general recommendation that will come up later, it relates to all of them, but just in terms of collections and how we can most effectively realize the full equal cost.
And my only comment is we have an agenda item later in our agenda that looks at water system improvements, but to the citizens and for the council, the heavy lifting is done. We have a 5-year plan. We have a master plan for the water system. We have rates and revenues. So we still need to look at a combination of grants and borrowing money, but I'm fully in support of the work that Pace and the staff has done.
So, I don't know how we want to proceed where we have an item and then we vote upon adopting the preliminary budget for,
Let's move through the enterprise funds first.
and then deal with all of that together.
Correct, and then I'll open public comment for the enterprise funds, and then we can do those in pieces.
So I move that we do
May
it.
I just clarify for a moment? There's nothing in the title of the agenda or the recommendation of staff for you to adopt the budget. In fact, what is in there that if you accept all this to go into the accounting system and then hear the recommendations of the finance committee, we would recommend you schedule a public hearing in which people may comment on the budget for your July 18th meeting, after which you could adopt the budget. Normally, the council has a public hearing on the budget before you adopt it.
Well,
We're just here to adopt these
we just,
recommendations.
yeah, well,
To hear the recommendations of the finance committee and hopefully authorize staff to put the preliminary budget into the accounting system, after which you can make whatever changes you want.
Okay.
well, we can also authorize staff to put it into the accounting system with changes at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
So then,
But if the council approves.
of course, yes. I mean, it's not a, so we can discuss that here. The finished product that is our budget document would still need a public hearing and needs to be in a more reader-friendly format, I think, for people to fully see it.
Councilmember Arthur, do you have a
Well,
question?
for the members of the council that are not on the finance committee and have not spent the hours that the finance committee has spent, including the city treasurer, who's pretty much in agreement with the finance committee, would you rather see the staff budget as is and a standalone list of finance committee recommendations, or do you want to see some sort of a merger of the two incrementally as we head toward adopting the budget?
Well,
Either way can work.
I think at any point, the city council can merge whatever it wants, because they're the real source of direction.
Exactly so.
So, I think Would you agree with that? All right, so if we could, Madam Mayor, could we do all the 218 enterprises and the airport separately?
Sure.
All right. So with sewer, we also recommend adopting the staff budget as it was prepared. Again, we spent, the last 6 months prior to May 16th reviewing that exact budget. So you guys are all familiar with the projected next year. Thank you, Pace Engineering, for putting that together. It definitely helps having these huge areas of our expenses and our revenues stabilized, and we know where we're going, not just this next year, for the next 5 years. So thank you.
All right.
Solid waste? Yep. Any questions on the recommendation?
No, and my only comment is, check me if I'm wrong. We think we have a Clemens contract that is expiring July 1 of this year, and the plan is to extend it 1 year. With the understanding it's an old contract and not really relevant to topics like greenways and to things like vegetation management.
I believe it expires, I don't remember this fully, but I think we already approved it for this next year.
Whether we have or haven't, we need to do due diligence on, are we getting the best bang for our buck? Do we want to advertise for a franchise operator? What services does the public want and are willing to pay for? And whether that's in the province of the Public Works Committee or somewhere else, I don't know.
Yeah, would you like to read the recommendation on solid waste while we're on?
Sure, well, investigate the hauling contract with Clemens prior to preparation of a 2021 budget. And I think Paul would agree that in our committee work leading up to the adoption of a 5-year plan, Pace does not claim the expertise to be a consultant on these issues, but it was an agreed upon council action in adopting the rates that we would explore these things before we do another contract.
Yes, as it relates to the budget, it's totally fine with the new, with the 218 passage of that 5-year plan. Operationally, we're fine, but there's a lot of loose ends, we all know it. We just like to not be revisiting all those loose ends next year. So that's a fairly straightforward, and I think staff agrees with us in the need to eventually update a contract in 1991.
I made that recommendation 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Your testimony doesn't change from venue to venue.
The only thing I would amend to that is that you need to, if you're gonna go out with a franchise contract, you have to go a minimum of 5 years. Some people are going 10, and the reason for that is your hauler needs a contract like that so they can borrow money to run their operation.
Or upgrade.
And that's, so I just tell you that in advance. And once you do that negotiation, yeah, that's what it's gonna be.
So anything else for the enterprises before? I do have a clarifying question. Why did we separate the preliminary budget and adopting the budget?
Sorry?
Why did we separate approving a preliminary budget and adopting the budget? Why did we separate those two items?
I just think those of us who wrote this up were screwing up.
Okay.
The only thing we're asking you to do right now is accept the preliminary budget into the system. You need to have a public hearing before you adopt.
Is that a municipal code section that requires us to do a public hearing?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure of that.
I know it's.
I mean, I defer to Dave.
You gotta have a
That's
public
just the way
hearing
everybody
for
does
your
it.
budget.
I mean, you need to get public comment and people on board. That's the image you're trying to provide. So I just highly recommend that.
Councilmember Roach.
As I'm looking at this, first of all, regarding the airport, from my personal
The airport
standpoint.
So we haven't got to the airport yet.
No, what I'm saying though in general is that all of these are pretty much, straightforward, and I'm not gonna have any problem with the airport, so I'm just saying that we really don't have any conflicts here.
Okay. That's fine. We haven't gotten to discussion yet. We're just in clarifying
Yeah, okay.
questions for this. I just want to back us up a little bit because it's confusing having two separate items. So my understanding tonight is we are not adopting a formal budget.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. We are not adopting a formal budget.
but for
But-
practical reasons?
But we are, for practical reasons, adopting the preliminary budget because that includes staff salary, and if we don't adopt something, nobody's getting paid July 1.
Well, it's
Correct.
also, we want to get something in the system so they could be working on the new data, is that correct? That's
You're
what you
both
said.
correct, you're both saying the same thing.
Okay, cool.
Good, yeah.
This is confusing, and I don't like how it was set up. So, all right, we'll just,
It's 12 and 13 are together, and here's your recommendations for all of it.
okay. So we'll right now open up a public comment section for water enterprise funding, solid waste enterprise funding, and sewer enterprise funding. Any type of comment on the recommendations from the finance committee and any comment on the preliminary budgets for that, knowing that this is not the final adopted budget. Nobody? All right, I will close the public comment. Discussion on water, sewer, solid waste, comments from the finance committee.
They're all three, the first time I hear in many years, in a healthy position with plans going forward.
Okay.
May I?
I do have one point. Would, actually, I'm okay with the wording. Okay, I was just gonna say, could we just put the motion to investigate hauling contract on a future agenda item, but that's basically what's happening. All right, go ahead.
I move to direct staff incorporate council-approved changes in the 1920 preliminary budget and set July 18, 2019 for a public hearing to consider an adoption of 2019 budget.
So we were gonna move through all of the items first before doing that, but there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the item?
Merely that could we vote on adopting that the only difference from staff would be that included recommendation for the solid waste fund. Are we fine voting on the two together?
Yes, the motion that was made was to approve everything.
Everything, and
Oh, and
he's got no conflict with the airport, I got no conflict with the trash.
I just want to make sure that we have ample public comment since you're going to make an adoption for the preliminary. Is there any comment on any other preliminary fund, the airport or general fund right now?
Whoa, we have a lot to discuss with the general fund.
I know, but Dave moved to approve
Okay.
everything, so I want to make sure
This
that.
is just a preliminary, we're trying to get,
But you're sending the.
Well, I mean, I think I would at least like to read publicly the rest of the recommendations and maybe discuss them before we move on with your comment that day.
well, I don't want everyone to be here, but that's all right. Go ahead.
Well, could we vote on the first three, or do public comment on water,
Would you,
sewer?
What are we voting on? I thought
I mean, if you're comfortable with that, but
it all ran together. It's a preliminary, we're gonna add the preliminary thing to the budget, right?
yeah, there are quite a few things in here that you might, if you agree with all of them, that's fine. But
this is why having two separate items is very confusing.
Yeah, and I don't know why.
Let's not do that.
We don't want this again.
Can I go back to just recommending item B, that you approve using the preliminary budget in the accounting system?
Okay,
I think that would be a whole lot better. Move that.
then,
What he said, I second his
And
move.
that's all.
and then it's not the official adopted budget.
I know, but tonight we could discuss each recommendation and move to alter the preliminary budget according to these recommendations, or give direction to staff based on these recommendations. Because those could happen tonight. So the alteration of it can happen.
You are the one who made
That's
it.
item C.
Okay, that's MC.
You just item B now,
Okay.
the preliminary budget.
So you were the one who moved. Do you want to rescind your motion? Or do
Yeah,
you want to
rescind
rescind
my
your
motion.
second? All right, they rescind the motion in second. So we're just back to discussing the water enterprise, solid waste enterprise, and sewer enterprise recommendation from Finance Committee, which recommends adopting the preliminary budget for 1920 with the addition of a motion to investigate the hauling contract with Clemens prior to the preparation of the 2021 budget. Are there any issues with that? All right,
Let's just, we're all in this theater together. So for instance, solid waste enterprise, I'm very pleased that the finance committee wants to take a look using consultant services at our current solid waste list of services, costs, and rates.
Well, to be fair, it's not that, it's just to investigate a hauling contract, we would have to have an RFP prepared.
Well,
And so to finish my point, format-wise, I assume the staff budget will not show an allocation of X number of dollars for a contractor to do this during 2021. That will be the finance committee recommendation. And we will go through on a binary basis, I don't know. But right now, we're trying to mush things together. I have the same uneasiness you do.
So my understanding with the motion is that staff will bring back a item for how we move forward for investigating the hauling contract with Clemens prior to the 2020 budget. This does not say we're gonna hire a consultant, this does not say how we're gonna go about the process, it doesn't say we're gonna go for 218. This is just for a future agenda item on how we're gonna move forward with that. That's the only thing that's on there.
The airport enterprise,
So we haven't gotten there yet.
okay, but half of these recommendations are policy recommendations. So which part goes into the budget we're going to adopt, and which part goes into the recommendation?
I moved a second ago, and I believe what I'd like to clarify then is that I move that we take the preliminary budget as it exists right now, put it in there, and we come back later on and do all this discussion with a public hearing.
All right, there is a vote.
We're just getting tangled around there.
I actually disagree. I think that we reviewed the budget last time.
Correct.
The only thing new we'd be adding this time would be consideration of the finance committee's recommendations. If we don't choose to act on any particular one of them, and we need more information, if half of the recommendations are to approve the budget or the preliminary budget for acting purposes, but they come with direction to staff to do things to improve our condition within that particular financial situation next year. So if we don't do anything, some of these aren't the recommendation of the finance committee to adopt them unless certain things are changed, adopted, unless city staff is given certain direction relative to them. The three we're talking about right now are very straightforward, but when you go into the airport and the general fund, our recommendation is contingent upon those things. I think that we have the time now. It is the next step in this budget process that we've been kind of working on, where City Council received a preliminary budget, now we're discussing it, next time maybe we'll adopt it.
So going back to the motion at hand, so I just want to clarify, there has been a motion made to adopt the preliminary budget 1920 in the accounting system effective July 1, 2019. That was moved by Councilmember Deutsch, and there's a second by Councilmember Keisler. My understanding, Councilmember Bryan, is that you don't agree with that at this point.
I'm fine with it, provided that in this meeting, we vote on recommendations, entertain recommendations to alter or change or amend the preliminary budget.
And I believe that is going to be item C, which is the next one.
So I'm fine with that.
Interim city manager.
I think the motion shouldn't be approved or adopt. It should be accept the preliminary budget into the accounting system.
Yeah.
Because you're not adopting that. We're just using it as a financial tool.
Are you all right with that?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on accepting the preliminary budget? Seeing none, we will move into a vote. All those in favor of accepting the preliminary budget 1920 into the accounting system effective July 1, 2019, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, people will get paid July 1. Cool. We are now moving on to item 13C, which is discuss and authorize changes to the preliminary budget, set a public hearing for July 18th meeting to consider adoption of the operating budget. So we will go back to the Finance Committee report, and just to summarize, it sounds as though, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as though we are okay with a majority of the items on this list. If you would like to go, I think it would just be better to go through the full list then, and just discuss your policy
I
recommendation.
would just make one comment if I can before you start. The only financial item in there is making it a full-time code enforcement officer versus half-time. So if you want to appropriate somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 additional dollars for that, that's the only one. Other than that, everything else is do a study, do a process.
Yeah. So, I would agree, and actually, like I said, we have discussed a number of these as future agenda items, and I don't think there was any dissent on any of these things being future agenda items. So,
Are you speaking the general fund too?
correct, I believe we have talked about the TUT tax coming back to us, things like that.
I'm just adding to Randy's list.
So this is your list.
Yeah, in the general fund area. Whoops. Mr. Chairman, I thought we did something on grant writing.
Oh, we do, yeah.
Where is that?
Well,
Because we would need an appropriation for that as well.
it was actually tied to the recommendation increasing the city's transaction and use
Oh, here
general
it is.
tax
I got it.
percentage rate in the amount of no less than 1%. We could go through why we arrived at that preliminary number. Sufficient to fund continued and upcoming law enforcement costs, animal control, a full-time code enforcement officer, continue our community promotions fundings, establish a proactive grant writing program, and in addition to these, maintain a healthy level of savings in our city's general fund, / general fund. So those are kind of the things that,
I mean, at least for the finance committee, I hope we are asking the council to make an appropriation for at least a part-time grant writer. And whether that differs with the staff recommendation, when it gets down to showtime and public comment. I hope that to be
in terms of the allocation, we thought there'd be a lot of input on how to best go after, obtaining grants. I know that a number of consultants might be superior to one person within the city doing it, so I think that's a bigger conversation that needs to take place. But that part of our need to raise the TUT is that there are funds out there that we could bring into the city of Dunsmuir that we already give to the federal and state governments. Our citizens already give that. So if we could afford to, and currently we cannot, but with the passage of a TUT increase, we'd be in a position to fund such a thing. If we do it beforehand, that would be great, but it's recommended that we move forward with this, and if we do, I think it might be something worth considering to begin that process prior to the passage.
All right, so as far as procedural, we haven't opened this up for public comment yet, we will, as far as authorizing changes to preliminary budget. As we said before, it appears that the hiring of a full-time code enforcement officer rather than half-time is the only monetary change that would be authorized with this vote. My understanding of the reading and what Councilmember Bryan has been saying is that the grant writing is a future discussion and is contingent on the TUT tax, is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
to be clear, my own opinion is that a full-time code enforcement officer is unsustainable without such an increase, or funds from a different resource. Part of it is that we cut, what would have been a $144,000 expense in law enforcement to maintain our same levels. We need to raise funds to continue the level of law enforcement service we desire here, and a big part of that is code enforcement and animal control that we could better achieve through our own resources.
So just really quick, so the transaction use tax change is recommended by the Finance Committee's item E on this agenda. So if it's all right with the Finance Committee, I'm going to pull that item out for a further discussion on item E and try and keep us on track tonight.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a cluster.
Okay.
You got one question?
Yes.
So we talk about full-time, are we talking about somebody that would do both code enforcement and animal control?
I don't believe that.
That's the proposal is what I'm hearing is.
We have not discussed that yet.
I just talked with Sergeant Wetstein, and do we leave it to the city manager, or does the council direct what percentage is community enforcement, what percent is code enforcement, what percent is animal control?
Well, I'd like to point, we've already directed as a future agenda item discussing the role of code enforcement in the job description.
Madam Mayor, I'm going crazy in the seat over here.
Okay.
Mr. Arnold, I've got to educate on you on Germany. It's West Side. You got Kaiser right after 6 years. It's West Side. Okay, I had to.
Okay.
Fabian, I'm German.
All right. Interim city manager, did you have something you wanted to add to the discussion or anything?
I'm sorry.
Did you have anything you wanted to add? It appeared that you did, but.
I would assume if you go to a full-time position, no matter what we call it, it's gonna do those jobs and several more.
All right, thank you.
A question, Matthew, how big a increase do you think?
How much would that be?
Yeah.
For the TUT?
Yeah, you want to jump?
Well, so
TUT we'll discuss later.
TUT is
Okay,
item
okay,
E.
okay.
You're on item C, which is discuss and authorize changes to the preliminary budget, set public hearing for July 18, 2019 meeting, consider adoption of operating for 1920. So again, we've asked clarifying questions. Do we have any other clarifying questions before we move to public comment?
Well, I think we should perhaps read to the airport portion of it, just so everyone understands what we mean by these recommendations. They're fairly straightforward. So we do recommend adopting staff budget as prepared, and that does include running a deficit operationally, or deficit period. So we ask that the city council, or even staff, research clarify legal status of airport fund enterprise, and there's already been work on that, and any assets associated with it. If it is legal, execute a promissory note on prior and future debt. Separate assets not essential to airport. Simply put, this would just be review what's proper to, we're trying to get the airport operation to stand alone on its own, and so we can see it. So something like development of the area behind it likely would fall to economic development and not the airport committee in terms of its nature. So that just kind of clarify that. And then develop, this is the real key, but develop operational plan that reasonably predicts solvency. What we mean by that is, when you look at the airport budget, we looked at it last time, there's these huge numbers. They can drastically change each year because of grants received from the FAA, the state, through Caltrans, et cetera. So to take all that away and just focus on fees coming in, money spent maintaining the airport from the city, how can we, we're not that far off, under $10,000 it looks like, kind of where we're trending. So just what, in terms of raising fees, as we're able to, we're legally allowed to, and or developing more hangars. We have a waiting list currently. That tells me that there's a demand for more hangars at a certain price. So, if we could get this plan in place, I think that would be key to us being able to determine whether we want to spend more resources on obtaining grants. And that's the next recommendation, spend absolute minimal amount on grants until operational plan is adopted. Because the difficulty for all of us up here, I just tell the whole public, is we're constantly asked to make decisions about the airport's future without that key plan in place for how many years before, we can expect this to break even and not lose a little bit. It's not losing that much, but over time, it can be a real detriment to Dunsmuir. So we're just hopeful that we can develop that plan in a reasonable time frame, and certainly before any money we spend on major grants. That's the recommendation.
I support everything you say.
So, Councilmember Bryan, just getting back to the item at hand, do any of these items, besides the hiring of a full-time code enforcement officer, is that anything that needs to be changed in the preliminary budget as far as a line item? I think a lot of us are more than okay with the policy recommendations, but I want to try and make sure we get on track as far as this is authorizing preliminary budget numbers and setting the public hearing for adoption.
I guess I would put it this way. I'm not comfortable approving the budget, even on a preliminary basis, unless these directions would be given. So,
I understand the need for improvement, I just want to be on track as far as, if someone would have read this item and not attended this meeting, I don't think they would have understood that there are policy recommendations in this, and there typically aren't policy recommendations drafted into your budget. I would be more comfortable that when we do set the public hearing for July 18, 2019, we can have a separate item talking about Finance Committee policy recommendations for improving the financial resiliency. That's one of our goals. But as far as monetary amounts, prior to that public hearing, really the full-time code enforcement officer is the only item that fits into this little descriptive thing for today. I'm trying to make sure that when we're going through this, like I said, I don't think anyone has an issue with the policy changes. I just want to keep us on track of, we're right now talking about setting that public hearing and if there's any change between now and then that staff should make to that budget. And I'm only really hearing the full-time code enforcement officer. We'll discuss item E a little bit later, which is the TUT, which that revenue, even if we did move forward with it, wouldn't be in the budget until later, although there could be expenses related to that, but that could be discussed then. I just want to keep us on track for
Well,
tonight.
item E definitely has financial implications, both in expense and
Yeah,
revenue, so that would be the other main one.
yeah, so we'll hold that to E, but other than that, is there any other recommendation on here that would change a line item in the budget?
You're right.
I know, I'm just gonna wait for anything else, okay, Councilmember Art.
Well, to the chair and the vice chair of the airport committee, should the city be looking at retaining a consultant to do a prospective plan that builds on the notion we could have an airport, an industrial park, an agricultural park?
We have,
If we're gonna market that asset and those possibilities, do we need help beyond the staff?
so again, that's an item that's not up for discussion right now, we're just talking about that preliminary
Well, no.
budget. If you would like to place it on future agenda, which we have talked about revisiting the airport on a future agenda, we can discuss it then, and then the options for going out for bid for that type of consultant as we put that together. But for tonight, we're just talking about any changes to the preliminary budget prior to
Well,
that public hearing.
I actually moved that we, because we're not gonna hire a code enforcement officer, full-time code enforcement officer before this meeting, we just, if we're not prepared to move forward on some of these policy recommendations,
I think they're fine, I just wanna make sure they're under an item that is very clear to the public too, that these are public policy recommendations and not changes to the budget.
Yeah.
Some of these are, and I'd
to
like
be
to take
clear,
those out.
all of them have an implication on expenses and revenues.
Well, yeah.
Going forward, everything we do. So my point would be, why even include the full-time code enforcement? We're not going to be spending any revenue on it until we have a formal budget adopted. So we can just,
Correct, and we can bring that up in discussion, I just wanna make sure we're getting through, we have to still do public comment. I just wanna keep on track, like I said, I don't think the items were set up very clearly, and I wanna make sure that, these things are in an orderly manner for people to understand what we're discussing and voting on, moving forward. So, looking at any of these other ones, like I said, the hiring of full-time code enforcement officer, the rest of these are public policy recommendations, which we can bring up.
prior to a budget adoption.
Correct.
Some of these policy changes will be very instrumental in one's opinion of the budget.
And this could be the charge to the finance committee at the next meeting, and that could be what the item is that now that the budget is done, the finance committee will be charged with investigating XYZ.
Yeah, we could refer to finance committee, staff, et cetera. The point being, it doesn't have to come up before council as a particular item if we don't want it to. Looking at it, we can direct staff to proceed with investigations.
Yeah. Okay, I would suggest that the council just direct staff to prepare a budget amendment that includes going to full-time or
Correct.
code enforcement officer, making a recommendation as to how much money would be needed for airport consultant or any other thing like that. If you have those in mind, we'll prepare a report, share it with the finance committee, and we can bring it back to July 18th meeting.
The finance committee chair makes the cogent point with regard to the airport. We have no key plan in place. How
Correct.
is the city gonna get a key plan in place?
And we put that on a future agenda, we have the workshop where we heard what's going on, and then we had talked about putting on a future agenda to have further discussion of what that looks like when we get the other pieces of the plans back from FAA.
It's gonna come out, we need consultant help.
And that's
So I
fine.
don't know why we're dragging it out.
Well, because we don't have an RFP, we don't know what we need.
No, I understand, but the point is, we're preparing the budget for 1920.
Correct.
If we're contemplating consultant help to develop an airport plan, it needs to be in the budget.
And how much money is that?
Let staff tell us.
I think they agree with you. I think you just need a motion on what you want to direct staff to provide.
How about, could staff provide a commentary on the timeline of all?
I mean, financially for the budget, that's all you're discussing right now, not policies. So the only two things financially that have come up so far that I've heard is full-time code enforcement officer, so we need to prepare a report for you showing you what those amendments would be, and money for a consultant.
And by the way, money for a consultant could come down to somebody that would be able to work off of a percentage of a grant that was obtained, for instance. And I know somebody right now that wants to do that, so that's part of the way to look at it.
But we
So
still have to go out for bid for that person. We have to give people an equal go at that.
Staff will be happy to take any input we can get in the meantime before we put this report together, which we will give to the finance committee before it goes back to the council on July 18th. Is that an acceptable motion?
Well, I want to open up to public comment before we go into discussion and do a final motion. Is there any public comment on the discussion and authorizations of changes to preliminary budget 1920, setting a public hearing for July 18, 2019 meeting to consider adoption of operating budget for the 1920 fiscal year, or anything that's been discussed so far? All right, great. Sorry. I have a headache, so I'm a little bit short. I'm always
Supposed to
short.
be telling jokes.
I know, I'm trying to make sense of what's going on here, including policy recommendations with a fiscal matter. I want to make sure they're separated and clear so that people understand what's going on. I don't think there's any issue with any of these things that are on here. The only one that I would like to discuss further at the next meeting is maybe preparing a final draft by May 1st, 2019 is not necessarily realistic every year, although I would agree that we are running very, very close to the end of the fiscal year and would not like to do that in the future, and I understand that one, but, and I'm more than happy with most of these other things.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to come back at the next meeting with a report on the changes of a full-time code enforcement officer and a, what'd you call it?
And discussion of all of,
Airport consultant.
And an airport consultant.
do you just want to say discussion on items presented by the finance committee? So they'll just discuss,
And items just presented to be discussed by the finance committee.
and then do you want to set the public hearing for July 18th, 2019?
And set a public hearing for July 18th.
Could I interject here briefly? I do feel strongly that we need to meet before July 18th, given all the work we've done on the budget, to suddenly take a break for a month when we're in the thick of these issues, just looked at the
I can't be here.
numbers.
I can't be here.
The public's mostly gone. I want to compliment the finance chair and the staff. If Mario Rubino was here, he spent all the hours with us as well. So we really have a pretty good consensus having dug down. But both the chair and the vice chair are pushing this process. So we have an intelligent, forward-looking budget in place by the new fiscal year. It's no wonder the mayor has a headache, because we're doing stuff that has never been done in the past several years. It feels good at the committee level, but I understand it's a jumble at this point.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and I agree, and we've talked about this a number of times, there's a lot of housekeeping items that need to be dealt with, and I don't think anyone is saying that we don't need to deal with them. I just want to deal with them in a logical order that we can have enough staff time devoted to each item that needs the attention. Like I said, for example, the hauling contract with Clemens, there's a lot of different options in there as you've discussed. And I don't want to necessarily say we're going to do this exact avenue right now. I agree we do need to look into it. So I would like to see a number of these as future agenda items
Well,
in their
I
time.
guess my point would be that we've spent a lot of time reviewing the budget, and when you spend money, you decide to spend money over the course of the full year, and you spend 2 months really looking at it, these are the recommendations that I think we would need a separate meeting with staff's input to go over what's the time frame for, executing all of this stuff. But give them the freedom to be, okay, we're gonna do this, 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 in this order, and be aware that it's connected to spending the money. And that if we've gathered them all together, these are the most useful things as far as the finance committee came up with. that we can do to better improve our financial situation. So if we could just give it its fair time in terms of giving a lot of direction at once. And I know that we haven't had a lot of time to look at it, but we can all discuss it further. Is there any possibility of meeting before July 18th? Because it just seems like there's too much going on. None at all, even July
I'm getting
7th.
married, bro. I'm going somewhere. Come on.
If we all have to meet in a hotel room, we will.
Please no, please no. No offense, but I'm good. I don't wanna be a part, I don't wanna be a part of someone's honeymoon.
All right.
Yeah, because our first meeting in July would fall on the 4th, so that would be, canceled.
The 3rd?
There is no way
Yeah.
that I'm being ripped out of my job that week.
Okay.
July 4th is like
Mount Shasta.
doomsday for Mount
Right.
Shasta. We pretty much like almost shut down. So, I mean, the only thing I could do, I don't want to interrupt the neighborhood watch again. I mean, I could do something the week of the 8th. So we would be, everyone would be here except for Big Dave and Randy.
We could have these back then, I could work with this back then.
Oh, no, I could be in Hawaii or Fiji. I don't know where I'm going.
Let him. If you're cool with us meeting and doing that,
Absolutely.
okay. We can discuss,
Have fun.
and so we can discuss a special meeting the week of the 8th through the 12th of having the public hearing.
Well, Big Dave, you have these recommendations, you have the budget worksheet, so you can always, if you wanted to write up anything that concerns you or any comments on it, we certainly have them read.
I like everything there. I think full-time code enforcement is mandatory. And I know the job, so it's gonna be a little bit of everything, and but full-time,
And you understand that given our $20,000, with the preliminary budget, $20,000 positive, you add another 50 to 60 there, you're looking at, without any community promotion fundings, so nothing for the pool, nothing for the library, et cetera, we're looking at a deficit of about $40,000 before we address the $90,000 worth of applications.
Can we, is this room open Wednesday at 6 PM on the 10th of July?
That's planning commission said Wednesday is planning.
yeah.
Okay, Tuesday the 9th.
That should be good.
Wait. Oh,
Again, you don't have to be there, Dave.
it says pre-op, I'm going to surgery on the 19th.
So Tuesday, July 9th at 6 PM, is that good for the other 4 council members as far as having a public hearing? So Big Dave, would you amend your motion to read set public hearing for July 9th, 2019?
Okay.
You just have to say yes or
yes.
no. Okay, I'll be back. So right now I have a motion to include a full-time code enforcement officer in the preliminary budget for adoption, setting the public hearing for July 9th, 2019, discussing, staff discussion on finance committee recommendations related to timing and if any other line items of the budget need to be amended.
And an airport council in there.
And then discussion on airport.
Yeah, and I hate to point this out, but until we discuss item E, I don't think we should be voting on amending the full-time or not, because they're,
Well, and that can be your opinion right now. There's just a motion, there's no second yet. Is there a second?
But, well,
I guess I'm asking to alter the motion to just set it for the next meeting, if
Okay.
that's acceptable to those motions.
So do you want to remove the full-time FTE code enforcement from your motion?
Sure.
Okay. So Dave has amended his motion to read motion to set the public hearing for July 9th, 2019, include staff discussion on finance committee recommendations, discussion item on airport consultant, including what cost that would be to the adopted budget. Did I hit everything?
He's shaking his head yes.
Okay. So is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
So there's a motion and a second. Discussion, Councilmember Art?
well, the missing piece in our process is this, that I agree with the chairman of the finance committee on what I will call the bundled approach. And the bundled approach means the council is open to raising the TUT.
Which that'll be item E,
We're not there yet.
so we're not there yet.
But what he's saying is he's not comfortable with any of these expenditures. And what I would hope is between the finance committee and the staff, we work out 2 or 3 scenarios to do E with the revenue consequences, at least at 1 year, if not 2 years. How much revenue do we need to make the general fund solvent, to do the hiring we want to
It
do?
seems we should have talked about it first.
Well, I mean, I hope everybody understands, if I got it right.
You got it, nail on the head, yeah.
So we need to, and the public needs to know, if we give them everything under the Christmas tree, are they willing to pay for it, and how much more will the tax be?
So when we get to E, we'll have a little bit more conversation about that, but I'll agree, they are intertwined, and so we'll get to that. Councilmember Deutsch?
One way to look at this, and it was brought up to me by Richard Dingus, and I thought it was a really good point. So I want to throw it out here right now because we're right in the middle of this. He feels that all these organizations that are looking for money right now are struggling together with all of us. He feels it's important that we honor as much of, if not all of the things that we're asked for, which would mean one of 2 things. The first assumption is that we would go into deficit. What Richard is recommending is that we take out a loan from one of our enterprise funds with an interest rate, whatever we want to do, with the idea in mind that it would be paid back over 2 years.
So again, we're back to the motion at hand, and we're discussing the motion at hand, which is a motion to set the public hearing for July 9, 2019, have staff discuss the finance committee recommendations, including if a line item should change, and what the timeline is for that, and discussion on an airport consultant and what the possible line item addition or change for that. We are not talking about any other motion at this time. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we will move into a vote. All those in favor of, again, moving to set the public hearing for July 9, 2019, direct staff to discuss finance committee policy recommendations, including what the potential cost impacts would be for the budget 1920 and timeline for those, and a staff discussion on airport consultant and what impacts to the budget that would have as well. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Would the council entertain moving up item 14B, just because Paul Ruder is here from, do you live in Reading, Paul?
Yeah, Bill, it's outside Reading.
So since we know that the highways are just delightful, would the council be okay moving up item 14B so we can get Paul Ruder out of here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're probably charging us to sit there.
Correct. Well, and I said pace a couple of times, and I've heard that there's a premium every time you just say your name.
That's not true.
Whatever you need to tell us, but, all right, we're gonna move up item 14B, which is authorization of funding for completion of planning and design for downtown tank relocation and replacement projects, spring improvements, water main replacement, and UV disinfection funding application. Interim City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. We had a plan to move forward with certain water projects. What we have now is a proposed amendment which will allow us to do planning work on those grants ahead of time. It's anticipated if the grants and loans are received, as we hope they will be, that these monies will be reimbursed to the city. But in the meantime, we would pay these monies, $178,000 out of the water fund. $153,000, by the way, was already in the water fund to pay for this work. So you're really amending the budget by $55,000. Okay, I can't make that any shorter so that Paul can leave at $1,000.
Okay, are there any clarifying questions from council regarding the staff report?
Is this an action vote or an informational item?
This is an action vote.
Action, we're asking that you, with a contract with Pace to do the work.
What's this budgeted for in the 5-year plan for the water? at this amount.
No, was it
Actually
153?
considerably more. Considerably more? Yeah, over a 5-year period.
Hey Paul, do you want to get up to the
Yeah,
mic so that
sorry.
we're recorded? All right, Paul Ruder, base engineer, go for it now.
Yeah, the 5-year financial plan actually planned for a little over $1.5 million of accumulated revenue to apply towards capital projects. And so I think, including a $500,000 planning grant, the city's contributed about $850,000 to date. So planning grant was grant, so really the only cash you've contributed towards capital projects is about $350,000. So that point is that, you know, the fund should be in good shape to proceed with these capital projects. And when we put the 5-year plan together a few years ago, the prospects for grant at that time weren't very good because the city's rates were so low. And so the plan is that the city would accumulate revenue, take care of planning and design towards ultimately loan-funded projects, because Prop 1 wasn't here yet, and your rates were too low to qualify for grants. So that's changed a little bit with Prop 1, and we've pursued some of the Prop 1 grants for the last few years, and they're just not coming through. The state's going through an accounting program change, and now the city's has this chlorination, disinfection order thing, and they're saying you've got till the end of December 2020 to implement it, and so we can't wait for the state anymore on the grant. So our proposal is to pursue USDA funding, which was the original plan 3 years ago when we did the financial plan.
What sort of loan is that? It's a,
Pardon me?
what type of loan would it be?
It's a 40-year loan, low interest. Since the city's severely disadvantaged, you'll get the lowest rate that USDA can offer. It's around 2.5% to 3%, somewhere in that range over 40 years. So it makes it affordable for small communities, or relatively affordable.
And just to make us feel good about this, what is the lifetime of the capital replacement project?
Yeah, you know, pipelines, you can figure 75 plus years. Tanks, you can probably figure 50 years. Kind of that ballpark. And rural development considers that before they give you a 40-year loan for something. They want to make sure the useful life exceeds that, like any banker would, right?
But I think the other thing that's important here is we're trying to get all this done so that if monies come up from other sources that haven't been available to us for reasons such as personnel, if we can go back, it's available with all the planning work done, that we can apply for other sources too. But at the moment, that's the target.
Yeah, and an important point is we're not out of the woods yet on grant money for the tank project. The chlorination thing that came about from Division of Drinking Water, what it did is they came to the city and said, hey, how come you haven't replaced that tank? And the city said, well, because your sister state agency hasn't given us the money after applying for it for 3 years. So now you have Division of Drinking Water putting pressure on the State Division of Financial Assistance to fund the project. So that's good. You guys are out of the fight. Let those agencies fight it out. And but we have to kind of give them a sunset date of probably early spring 2020. That if the state, you got to give us some grant money by then, or we have to proceed with rural development to meet this other state imposed deadline. So they're working toward that end.
And on top of that, this is showing progress on the project. Whereas if we show no progress on the project,
It'll be money.
you're certainly going to be.
Right.
So basically, this will get all the projects shovel ready.
It will, because the planning grant that you got funded like 75% of your water main design. We didn't know about the spring improvements when you got the planning grant, so that's part of what we're requesting. But it's likely the spring improvements could be funded through IRWM. In fact, there's a high likelihood of that, and those monies could be reimbursed. So
Okay.
there's about 3 different funding agencies for 4 different project components that we're juggling. So.
Are there any other clarifications for interim city manager or Paul Ruder, Councilmember Art?
Excellent memo, thank you, base engineer. The one near-term question is around ultraviolet treatment on the water side, where would that facility go? And would it really resolve the coliform issues or not clear?
That's a good point. We would look at a couple different spots, but one obvious location is by your lookout lift station by the bottling facility. Somewhere in there, pull suction upstream of that, run through the system. The reason that was kind of added kind of last minute is Prop 50, which was passed in 2002, allocated $10 million towards UV funded projects. To date, they've spent zero. So Department of Water Resources is administering that, and they're getting pressure finally after 17 years to spend the money. And they're approaching, potential projects. So the Division of Drinking Water, they would be all for a Prop 50 grant to add UV disinfection for the city, because they know as soon as they require you guys to chlorinate, every citizen in Dunsmuir is going to be on their doorstep in Reading tearing walls down. So the UV is kind of a compromise. Now, I think they would still require you to provide emergency chlorination facilities, but if you could get a Prop 50 grant to pay for UV disinfection, that would do your disinfection and you wouldn't have to add chlorine. You would still need the facilities there, but the UV would basically take the place of chlorine and you don't have a residual in your water. So with that funding kind of coming up, and we're looking at it for the community of Quincy right now too. They have an unchlorinated system and they've got some coliform issues out of a spring, and we're working with DWR on funding for them. So they got to give the funding to somebody. It's been on the books for 17 years and they haven't spent it. So that's kind of the background on the UV part.
Are you making a recommendation that we move this from optional to we're doing it?
Well, what that money right there would take care of is the application process. There's an environmental component, engineering report, same old thing, to apply for that funding. So that $25,000 is in plan, to apply for it.
All right, any other clerical comments?
The other question is, and hopefully tonight we have a new public works committee that Pace will be involved in, but the references are to our 2015 water rate study plan. Has there been an update since 2015? And if not, when should we have an update?
An updated plan, is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, I know that Blake and sounds like Matt maybe have kind of been looking at the plan relative to actual revenues and expenditures, and I think things are tracking relatively close, right? And so I don't see a need to go back through, a new plan. I would just check your revenues and expenditures each year. Are we on track? Are we, do we need an adjustment? And so, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions just regarding the authorization for funding for completion of the planning and
I just
design?
want to point out that we have already been approved for 153. So this is just 25,000 more. 153 of this number has already been approved. So that's, I think it's imperative that we should remember that.
Okay, any other clarifying questions before we move to public comment? All right, we'll open up the public comment section of this item. Is there any comment regarding the authorization of funding for completion of planning and design for the downtown tank relocation and replacement project, spring improvements, water main replacement, and UV disinfection funding application? Seeing none, we will close the public comment and move into discussion. Is there any discussion on the item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to authorize funding in the amount of $178,000 for completion of planning and design for downtown tank relocation and replacement project, spring improvements, water main replacements, and UV disinfectant funding application.
Second the motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion at hand? We'll move into a roll vote. Councilmember Deutsch.
Aye.
Councilmember Bryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Keisler.
Aye.
Councilmember Art.
Aye.
And myself, Mayor Lucchese. Aye.
Thank you. Go home.
All right, thank you.
Yay! Yeah, all right.
And we have a 2-minute recess.
All right, we will recess for 5 minutes and reconvene at 8:05 p.m.
Take the answer, yes.
Okay. All right, we will reconvene in the regular meeting and return to our old business. We are on item 13D, which is consider adopt a resolution to create Public Facilities and Services Committee and define committee purposes and parameters. I will open this up to Councilmember Art and Keisler, who have been discussing the item.
Well, it's really the current city council that voted to create several committees at the beginning of the year. Brown Act committees rather than ad hoc committees. And out of respect to the existence of the airport committee, the jurisdiction that was left, as detailed in the purpose part of the draft resolution, we are to monitor and advise the City Council and Planning Commission of the City of Dunsmuir on policy recommendations, problems and needed action items relating to its utility enterprises, water, sewer, and solid waste, streets and sidewalks, the historic district, and the Union Pacific Railroad. So I tried to follow the mayor's template for creating the two committees that we have so far, disaster recovery and finance. When we looked at this the last time, I had a list of proposed goals, and several of the members of the council had problems with the last two. So in the version I forwarded to Julie, the city manager, I wiped out the last two. In the version before you tonight, all of them are wiped out, and that's fine with me because we can do this once we are constituted as the Public Works Committee. So there are no attached goals at this point. It has been properly formatted by the staff, which I appreciate, and it does involve appointing public members. And that is my presentation.
Are there any clarifying questions at this point? Seeing none, I will move to public comment. Is there any public comment on the proposed resolution creating a public services committee? Seeing none, we will come back to discussion. Thank you for reformatting this for the concerns of the council. I'm actually happy that the goals are not in there. I would like if this committee is created to work with staff to best assist them with that. I'm still on the fence about the inclusion of the historic district in public facilities and services, just because of some of the planning aspects of that. Maybe it's more appropriate for that to be in the planning commission. There is a running discussion about the historic district and finding the paperwork for that. Doing a little bit of side research, most historic districts are mandated by the state to have their own specific historic district committee. I don't know if that's this committee that can be charged with that purpose, or if you have to create a specific historic district management committee, or however that's put together. I haven't gotten a firm answer on that yet.
You can look into it.
And that may be the committee's first action, is to look into what that looks like, because there's certain reporting, there's certain things that you have to do.
There's also funding available to be enacted, so we'll look into that.
Correct. So I'm fine with no goals at this moment, and having a potential committee come back with goals that have been agreed upon with staff to assist them, because this committee, my biggest concern is this committee is very, very similar to staff work. Just because we have public works directors, we have utility directors, and I want to make sure that this committee is assisting them and not directing them. That would be my biggest.
We're only planning to meet once a month, and so to me, it's going to be nowhere like what's going on with the finance committee.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the item at hand? Interim city manager.
I apologize, I did this the last time, and when I marked it up this time, I missed it. But under F, composition of committee, what's still in there, city engineer to attend those?
Oh,
Take that out, yeah.
And again, if there is a meeting where the subject matter requires the city engineer to be there, the city manager just request that.
agreed,
It shouldn't be a standing.
Yeah, that'd be expensive.
agreed.
All right, so the authors of the resolution have agreed. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, we'll just accept that amendment into the resolution. Is there any other discussion on the item at hand, or is there a motion to approve?
What do you want to do, public comment
We already did.
We did.
on this one?
Yeah, sure we did. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2019-12.
Yep.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Dunsmuir authorizing the creation of the Public Facilities and Service Committee and defining the committee purposes and parameters,
As amended.
As amended.
And by title only.
and by title only.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion at hand? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor of approving resolution 2019-12 as amended and by title only, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
And the understanding is Big Dave and I are on the hook.
Actually, do we want, let's make a subsequent motion to appoint members to that. So there's a discussion at this moment that Councilmember Art and Councilmember Keisler would like to serve as the city council members.
I move that.
That's a particular action item not on the agenda. We can certainly put that on the July 9th meeting.
Okay, all
Fine.
right, thank you. All right, we'll now move on to 13E, approve direction for proceeding with the transaction and use tax changes as recommended by the Finance Committee. Just as a summary of what we have talked about so far
I'll
is,
go back to that slide.
so there is a recommendation from the Finance Committee to increase the city's transaction and use general tax percentage rate in the amount of no less than 1% sufficient to fund continued and upcoming law enforcement costs, animal control, a full-time code enforcement officer, continued community promotions funding, establish a proactive grant writing program or service, and in addition to these, maintain a healthy level of savings in our city's general fund reserve. Is there any other points that the Finance Committee would like to bring up at this point, or are there any clarifying questions?
Well, if we're seeking direction, I think for the benefit of the record, the chair of finance ought to delineate what that direction is as best we can.
What, I would just like to say the 1% was arrived at just using preliminary numbers on these listed things. But that we just want to maintain that it's general tax that would apply to everything. So the direction we're looking for would be to, on advice of staff recommends, if I understand correctly, that we include the public in this at every stage. So before we were to say enact an ordinance doing this, that we involve them with at least a public hearing or a public workshop session. So I think the direction would be for staff to put together a preliminary report, or isn't it preliminary, a report on estimated costs of what funds it would take to sufficiently fund all these stated goals, because that's kind of our basis of what we'd like, our initial reasons currently for doing that. A reason that's not on here is economic development, but part of it is if we achieve all of these, I think that will come with it. If there's any leftover funds, rare enough thing in the city of Dunsmuir, we do need to spend it on the few items that will.
To raise the tax is gonna go to the vote.
Yeah.
And that's gonna cost money to do that.
So again,
What did you say?
we're not in discussion yet, but I believe the question is are we going to also look at the cost of going to either a special or a general election as part of this process?
Yes.
Okay.
We could do that, but I think we should also maybe set a date for a meeting to engage with the public, to begin this public process, and let's moving forward with that. We could either, I guess it just be time, we could discuss what staff brings back as what it would take in terms of the amount of increase to best meet our goals for the general fund. At the next meeting, so May 9th, we can do that.
Councilmember Dorsey, you have a question?
Yeah, I think that in terms of working this out time-wise, that we want to try and make sure, I assume that, Julie, can we get this by November? On the November? March.
No.
March. March is the next
March.
general election.
All right, that's, yeah.
Yeah, so we do have time, but I think that it does go, the direction we take with this is very important with the direction we take with this year's budget since adoption. So I would like us to, if possible, do the ordinance part and then engage the public before the vote. If we already would have to. Do you have any recommendations on how we could have this direction be given simultaneous with budget adoption.
I think what all this is boiling down to is the finance committee is asking the council for the direction to have them move forward and come back with recommendations about this. Staff is attempting to put together a lot of information about the process, not what we're talking about in money terms. I mean, we can certainly put that together quickly, but there's the process, so we have to coordinate this with the Board of Equalization. I'm certainly going to be recommending to you, if I do this report, that you tie in with some general election, because if you do a special election, which would cost more, $20,000 to $30,000 for the election, no matter when you do it or how you do it. But if you do it with a general election, you have more people voting. And the reality is on tax elections, those people who are going to vote no are going to show up. Those people who vote yes may or may not show up, but they show up for general elections because there's other items that have them show up. So that'll be part of what we bring back. But I think what we're asking, Finance Committee is asking for right now is to designate them lead and bring back more information to the council.
Is that correct, Councilor Bryan?
If we can't actually direct to move forward with it, if we need more information before moving forward, then I'm happy to have the finance committee do that work and recommend more precisely what to do. Because we don't have, this recommendation doesn't include do it in March versus next November. There might be some things to consider there. In some ways, the finance committee did its work by recommending this as a solution to many financial difficulties coming up in the next 3 years. I always bring back 3 years because of the law enforcement situation. But it might be the work of the council to best determine how we're going to best implement this revenue source with our citizens. So I'm fine with the council doing it in full. It just needs to be, could we have some commitment to do it? But we haven't worked out the exact time frame yet. That's what I'd be looking for in this more specifically.
All right, so we are at clarifying questions. Are there any other clarifying questions for Councilmember Bryan, Finance Committee, or staff? Seeing none, we will open the public comment period. Is there any public comment on the direction for proceeding with a transaction and use tax change? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move into discussion. Who would like to start? I know Councilmember Bryan has put it out there. Councilmember Hart?
Well, an interesting point was raised in public comment from the origin of the TUT to its producing revenue to who are the beneficiaries, and the notion the community was very involved, specifically the library, in convincing the community that Prop P was worthy of adoption. We know to a person in the Finance Committee, we had to convince the citizens that raising this tax is in their interests. So I agree with the Chair of Finance. The first step is to get advised by staff what is the process for adoption, do we need 0.75%, 1%, 1.5%? When will that revenue start to flow into the general fund? And it's all interconnected, but to me, this is a key part of adopting our new budget. And so I'm with the chair. I hope we make the decision earlier rather than later, because if the council doesn't want to do it, then on the table is cutting a lot of funds to a lot of organizations.
Yep.
Councilmember Deutsch?
We do have a little bit of time now when we realize the calendar, and first we're going to be able to do, the bottom line is in March at least. So I recommend we table this and get more direction from the staff and bring it back as an item after we've gotten the information that we're looking for.
Is that a formal motion?
Yes, it is.
Is there a second to postponing discussion on this item to a future agenda? Is there,
Well, that's why I asked, what is the direction? And there seems to be a little bit of difference as to what the direction is.
I guess, is there a second?
I'll second it.
all right, there's a motion and a
Just
second.
get with more.
And we'll open up discussion on the motion at hand, which is to postpone this item to a future agenda. I personally am not, or for more information, I'm personally not okay with postponing this because even though we appear to have additional time, it takes a lot of time to do feasibility and looking at the different options we have. It does take time to write the ordinance. We saw that with the cannabis tax ordinance. John Kenny, God bless his soul, is not the fastest person in the world writing ordinances. We do need to get a lot of ducks in the row. For the November ballot, typically you have to have your ordinance language in by July, so that's a 4-month lead time. So even though we could be looking at a March election, we're looking at a due date at the beginning of December. And that doesn't give us a lot of time to do public input workshops, reports on estimated costs of the election and anticipated revenues. I would not be in favor of postponing without more clear direction to staff.
Yeah, I second Mayor Casey's reluctance to postpone this. I think at the very least, we should ask staff to prepare a full schedule or recommendation on how to enact this and at what amount, and just a report on how we could best increase the tax, or at least put this to a vote in the March election, which will be general, and the presidential primary no less. So that should have decent.
I'd be willing to pull my motion, or I'd be willing to amend it to say that we'll bring it back at our next meeting or some other meeting with the idea that we get more information.
That's all we wanted, more information, I'll second that one.
And the finance committee can work with staff on
That's
that,
what I was thinking.
on that, but
Yeah, I mean, my position is I would like to move forward with the process to increase the TUT. I'm just taking a very strong stance on it
Yeah.
instead of waiting for
Is
more
that a
information.
motion?
Well, we have a motion and a second. I could make another motion under that
He
motion.
withdrew his motion.
What?
I think he withdrew his motion.
I withdrew it and modified it, but I withdraw it completely if you're okay with that, Dave.
Yeah,
Okay, it's withdrawn.
go ahead.
Okay. So I would motion to direct staff to prepare a preliminary report on estimated costs to holding a special election or general election in the next calendar year 2020, either in March or November, to look at the cost for adding a ballot measure to either of those options. Also, please include financial information on anticipated revenues for various percentage increases, which would be 0.25%, 0.5%, and 1%. And then just a preliminary input staff recommendation for public outreach schedule.
I'll second that.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Beautiful.
See,
You stopped at one,
yeah,
not 1.5?
we can't go any higher than one, I believe.
Yeah, we can. We can go to 2. We got to start
we
at
can
half,
range
we
to
can
go
go
to
to 2.
2, then we can go all the way up to 2.
Yep.
Do we want to request more increments other than that?
You're the finance committee, what were your
No,
numbers?
I think we should look at the maximum. I suggested here, from my preliminary research into it, the finance committee, together we discussed this, that should be.
Why? Why? Look at
Kind of just
it.
ask that you not tie the hands of staff.
Okay,
We're going to do a report.
okay.
My recommendation is that report go to the first, to the finance committee, and then the finance committee will bring you their recommendation. Staff is not going to make a recommendation on recommending a tax, but we will give you all the options if the council wants to go forward with the tax.
Yeah, and
Let's present it to the finance committee. When they're ready, they'll bring it back to you.
Okay.
we'll try to do it for the July 9th meeting.
If you get a staff report before then.
I
I don't think you're going to get a staff report
The whole,
before then.
the whole intention is to do this simultaneously with the budget.
Right.
So,
would say that's pretty
A lot
rough.
of the information that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I would just say that's a little rough. I think there's general consensus of the council that we're in favor of raising it to meet these revenues. We wouldn't be collecting this tax
before that, yeah, no, that's true.
for at least a little bit after, if the tax is approved, we would be collecting it right away, so it wouldn't be something that would impact this next fiscal year, besides the cost of election.
And I'd just like to add to that, a lot of the information we're going to be collecting to put in that report is dependent on other agencies giving us that information. If we get it quick, we'll give a quick report to the finance committee. If we don't get it, we'll wait until we get it and then give a report to the finance committee.
I'm not gonna add a future agenda date to my motion, but I will amend my motion, if you're okay with it as a second, to refer this report to the finance committee for
I so second.
All right, cool. All right, any other discussion?
Well, one of the policies policy issues for all of us is for a general fund that chronically runs dry, do we want to raise the tax sufficiently to create a reserve in the general fund? We haven't talked this over.
No.
No, I think-
10%, 10%, 20.
so again, you'll get the preliminary report, you'll have that discussion and recommendation.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at all the numbers in greater detail.
All right, so just to reiterate, there's a motion and a second on the table to direct the finance committee and city staff to put together a preliminary report on estimated costs to holding a special or general election in the year 2020, anticipated revenues for the possible percentage increase, and then a recommendation on public input, timelines, and activities. All those in favor,
Aye.
please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Was that okay, Julie?
That wasn't taken.
Okay. All right, we are now on to new business item 14A, designate League of California Cities voting delegate and alternate for annual conference.
I nominate the mayor.
Can we have a discussion first and public comment? When is the annual conference?
October.
There's actually, what do you have your agenda there? I can get you the form. They do require whoever you designate as a voting member actually attend the conference, that is register. So you need to first ask yourselves who's actually going to go.
Well, that's why I'm asking what the date is,
October
because
16th through 18th, it's in your packet.
So October 16th.
I, for some reason, do not have a packet right now. I apologize for not grabbing my mailbox.
It is.
Okay.
He's got it. 16th or 18th, Long Beach.
Okay. I just wanted to check because the State Planning Association conference last year fell on the same dates as the League of California Cities. And I need to attend those to maintain my certification credentials as a professional, so that usually takes precedent. So it looks like that conference will not conflict with this. I should be able to go, but I think that's why we have a delegate and alternate. I will hold my schedule for those dates. Okay,
And typically, it's the mayor.
yeah. I just wanted to make sure I could actually go. Okay, is there any other clarification questions on this before I open up public comment?
I'd like to ask who all plans on going.
Supposed to ask the same thing.
I plan on going.
Okay, no? So 4 out of 5 of us are willing to go?
Gonna nominate
Well,
the
let's,
vice mayor to be the delegate.
before we go into that,
Okay.
is there any public comment?
I would just be so proud if you represented Dunsmuir.
Thank you. Oh, that's nice. See, that's why you do public comment. But, all right, we will close the public comment section of this. Go for it, Councilmember.
I nominate the mayor to be our representative and the vice mayor to be our alternate.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
And there's been a motion and a second. Is there a discussion on the motion?
You.
Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We have delegates.
You're it.
I've never been to Long Beach.
Oh.
We'll tell you about
Wait,
the taxes.
introduce your taxi driver, right? We know.
We got some stories for you.
All right. Seeing no other new business, because we did 14B earlier in the meeting, we'll move into item number 15, outside council meeting reports. Are there any other meeting reports? Finance committee has pretty much been covered in the action items. Councilmember Tyson.
I am now the best friend of the Friends of the Pool.
Okay.
The Park and Rec has informed that we found a second crack.
Wonderful.
The people that fixed the pool are going to fix our crack. It cost $10,000, and they're going to take a note from us so that we can get the pool fixed and up and going on the week of the 8th as planned. I want to personally thank the pool people out of Reading.
Wow.
His dad fixed our pool, and now he's fixing our pool. It's been a family business for a long time. I want to thank him for that, thank him for making it happen, and just let everybody know that the Park and Recs could use some extra donations to fixing the pool. We got lifeguards, the kids are swimming. There's a little thing extra if you wanted to help out, just be aware of it. And I just wanted everybody to know that the pool's still gonna open, and we got some good lifeguards too, so. That's the report from the pool, as I will be giving it every year during summertime, as long as I sit on this committee.
Thank you. We need to talk about fundraiser because I was approached by a store up in Mount Shasta that does the roundup and said they'll do roundup for a project and they would do the pool. We just have to write up the sad sob story of why we need to fund the pool. So we'll get together about that.
Cool.
Okay.
We also need to talk some trail stuff too.
Yeah, we kind of divided, Dave and I were like the weird, we never put together a committee definition for the trails and recreation. Dave just was taking care of recreation, I just somehow got the trails.
Yeah.
We've just been like side by side kind of puttering forward, but we'll figure that out one of these days.
You know, I don't even like bicycles.
I
If they
don't,
don't go like that, they ain't going.
but, so are there any other outside meeting reports? We've had any other outside meetings besides getting the budget together and stuff like that, so.
I'd like to thank everybody that was involved with the railroad days. I think everybody did a great job. It was nice seeing Peter Orth in his hot rod that's now road.
From the local transportation commission, I can report that Melissa Cummings is no longer the transportation person there.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, she's moving to someplace else in the county.
Okay.
So we're in the process of trying to line up a contract relationship with somebody that will take her place, somebody that has the experience to pull it off. But I just want to pass it on, so that change is taking place.
Wow.
So they're not advertising a position, they're gonna go out for council.
Yeah, they're gonna do an RFP looking for somebody probably like from down in Reading area that has the same set of skills that could be used, so it doesn't have to be a full-time job to pull it all together.
Interesting.
That lady will be missed.
Yeah, definitely.
She's no longer doing the airports either, so I don't know who to call.
Yeah, we're looking for that.
All right, thank you for that update. I was curious, I just got a memo the other day that said vacant, and I was like, oh, where'd you go? So, all right, any other outside meeting reports? Seeing none, we'll move into consideration of future agenda items. I'm gonna cover one really quick about the agenda format and everything. I'll go back to the council policy document and bring that back for a future agenda to amend the council protocols to basically move back to the original agenda that we had.
Yeah, because this one kind of,
That's
I don't
okay.
want to say sucks, but kind of sucks.
We can try new things. That's fine.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'll just bring that back for council consideration for a future agenda item. Any other future agenda items? Councilmember Deutsch.
You all were notified about this. I'd like to bring to the next council meeting an agenda item dealing with mountain medics in the airport. Just to give you a brief summary of the situation. They had rented as a commercial and they were planning on getting an airplane. They put that off and they hadn't gotten the airplane to go in there. When this process went through, they were tagged as being commercial and given 30 days notice. I'm very concerned that if we don't work with them, that we could lose them as a business in town. So what I'd like to do is look at this as a special case and consider them to be able to stay in rather than being put to the end.
Could we, instead of doing, it'll be a future agenda item, would charge the airport committee with that task item and come back with a recommendation?
Yeah, the only problem is that there's a 30-day notice in play right now.
Okay.
So in other words, if we don't do it before the next 25 days or so,
If you don't give direction to the city manager, stupid airport manager, to change what he's already done, they're done.
So we have a proposal for a airport contract, mountain medics, a future agenda item. Is there a second to that future agenda item?
I have a conflict of of interest, so I
Okay.
won't be participating.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you understand what he said?
Yeah.
Did you?
Uh-huh. And I don't
Okay,
think-
I don't think you understand. If she's saying it like that, we're missing something.
What I'm saying is this, right now, they were in there as a commercial,
Correct.
and
You
the,
don't need to justify.
You, yeah,
Just get
we're
it.
gonna put it on a future agenda
Yeah, that's
item. Okay.
So do you want it on the 9th or the 18th is my question.
If it's able to go on the 9th and not conflict with the other items of the budget, I would prefer that, but if it has to wait until the 18th, that's fine. I wasn't gonna give it a preferred date, I was just gonna say future agenda when you
We have
have
the
it.
information. I didn't think they were on the 9th.
Okay, perfect. Typically with the future agenda items, the idea is to just say, this is what we're gonna do, we'll bring it back when you have enough information when it's appropriate. So this one, obviously, it's timely, it can go on the next one, that's fine.
and then, Madam Mayor, since you and I are on the committee, maybe you and I can sit together and talk with city manager about this and recommend from there.
Okay, sounds good. Anyone else future agenda items? Just to recap, we will have the public hearing on July 9th for the adoption of the 1920 operating budget. There will also be another item for the adoption of the policy recommendations of the Finance Committee at the 9th meeting in tandem with that, with the recommendations that were put in motion. Is there any other things that we've forgotten? Councilor Hart?
Well, my list is brief, but the topic is parking in the downtown area and public restrooms in the downtown area. Julie takes excellent notes, and in our meeting of June 6th, Councilmember Deutsch said the city needs to plan for parking, and it does. So what would it take to get the planning commission to start looking at core area parking options? And I've had several downtown businesses say, as the downtown gets more busy, you can put a sign on your door that says restroom for customers only, but there's a dilemma when somebody comes in and says, I need to go to the bathroom. So we have Children's Park, we have the core area, and I think the good news is there's no parking on Sacramento Avenue more and more over the weekend. This is a sign of success. We need to work with UP, we need to start planning a planning commission item.
So would you like to refer parking to the planning commission agenda?
And public toilets.
Okay, so there's a motion to refer off-street parking and parking accommodation and public restrooms to the planning commission for recommendation to council on action.
Can we make a motion or direction without it having been on the agenda at this point tonight, at this point?
Yeah, no, it was really for future.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can put it on for a discussion item and talk about that. One of the things I don't know, it never got followed up on, I think because Mark left. I had sent a list of the topics we've been talking about here at council to Arlene about asking for planning commission charges to have them look at certain ordinances and land use policies that we've been talking about as a whole and people have been asking questions about. I don't know whatever happened to that. I was asking for them to give input on if they have any other ordinances or land use policies that need to be amended or updated. So,
I'd be happy to follow up on that.
Yeah,
Tell me what you're talking about.
sure, we'll figure it out. Because off-street parking and parking policies was one of the things that we've talked about a lot. And so we were hoping that planning commission could investigate our current ordinance and
They just updated that, I thought, a year or so ago. They updated the parking requirements as part of planning. So that may be just to look into that. Wasn't that true? You remember that?
Yes, for new construction.
so not existing. Okay. All right, we can consider that for a future agenda item. Anything else?
Well, the other, I guess the question as chair of our emergency response committee, and we all know the fire season is upon us. I had a helicopter beep overhead a couple of nights ago. What if? Do we need to worry about evacuation drills or speeding up any part of the what-if scenario, or do you think we're okay?
So Chief Padilla is working on an emergency plan and working with the DPAC on that.
Okay,
So we should be securing something when that's ready. Any other future agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move to adjournment. Is there a
I'll
motion?
make a motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
wait, one more little one. After we get a new city manager, broadband is a topic I've been working on since I was on the city council last time. And all of us have noticed, we actually have a small utility that wired up Dunsmuir, including this building. But I would like to have a 30-minute block where we get a little informational briefing from Cal Oregon Tel that wired us up, from Snowcrest, that's our incumbent, and from Northland as to how close are we now as a city to FCC state broadband levels. Are there franchising opportunities, are there partnering opportunities? It would be more a briefing to see where we are.
All right, we'll work on that and either do that as a report, but let's, we'll do that in the future. All right,
Thank you, Cal.
there's a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please